The salvage ship drifted through the empty darkness of space. Commander Velric stood on the bridge, his blue skin reflecting the dim lights of the control panels. His crew had been searching this sector for 3 weeks, looking for anything valuable to sell. "Sir, we have something," his scanner officer called out. Multiple large objects dead ahead. Velric moved closer to the screen. What he saw made his breath catch. Ships, dozens of them. No, hundreds of them, all floating silent and dark in the void. "What species built those?" he asked. The officer checked his database. "They're human vessels, sir." "Very old design? Maybe 300 years or more." Velric smiled. Human technology was always worth good money, even the old stuff. "Take us to the largest ship. We'll board it and see what we can salvage." The salvage ship moved slowly toward a massive carrier. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their own ship. Its hull was scarred and damaged, covered in strange markings and symbols. Across the side, faded letters spelled out a name. Indomitable. "No power signatures," the scanner officer reported. "No life signs either. It's completely dead." "Good," Velric said. "That makes our job easier. Prepare the boarding team." 20 minutes later, Velric and 5 of his crew stood inside the human carrier. Their flashlights cut through the darkness of the corridors. Everything was silent. The air was stale but breathable. "This ship is huge," one crew member whispered. "How many humans did it hold?" "Thousands, probably," Velric answered. He checked his scanner. The main computer core should be 3 levels down. That's where the valuable data will be. They walked through the empty hallways. Their boots echoed on the metal floors. Velric noticed something odd. The ship wasn't just abandoned. It looked lived in. There were personal items in some rooms. Pictures on walls. "Names written on doors, sir," another crew member called. "You need to see this." Velric entered what looked like a farming area. Rows and rows of dead plants filled the large room. "They tried to grow food," he said quietly. This wasn't a military ship anymore. They were trying to survive. Why would they do that? Someone asked. Velric didn't answer. Something felt wrong about this place. They reached the computer core. Velric connected his data device to the old human systems. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding," he muttered. The moment he activated the connection, lights flickered on throughout the room. Then the hallway. Then from what Velric could see through the windows throughout the entire ship. "What did you do?" his crew shouted. "Nothing. I just connected to the computer." Alarms began to sound. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. The crew heard mechanical sounds all around them. "Doors sealing. Systems activating. We need to leave, now," Velric ordered. They ran back toward their boarding point. Behind them they heard something worse than machines, footsteps, many footsteps, and voices speaking in the human language. Velric risked a look backward. His blood went cold. Humans, dozens of them, emerging from side corridors. But these weren't normal humans. They were thin, pale, their faces hard and cold. They wore old military uniforms, patched and repaired many times. And they were armed. "Run!" Velric screamed. The salvage crew sprinted through the corridors. Behind them, the humans didn't chase. They just watched, their weapons raised but not firing. It was somehow more terrifying than being attacked. The crew reached their boarding tube and scrambled through. "Disconnect!" "Go, go, go!" Velric yelled as soon as everyone was aboard. The salvage ship pulled away from the Indomitable. As they retreated, Velric watched through the window. More lights were coming on throughout the massive fleet. Ship after ship was awakening. What they thought was a graveyard of dead vessels was coming back to life. "Get us out of here," he whispered. "Maximum speed." Deep inside the Indomitable, Admiral Sarah Kane sat in her command chair. The cryo-sleep fog was clearing from her mind. Around her, her bridge crew was taking their stations, moving with practiced efficiency despite just waking up. "Status report," she commanded. Her voice was rough from centuries of sleep. "All fleet ships responding, Admiral," her operations officer reported. "We have approximately 42,000 vessels still operational. Systems are old but functional. We're running diagnostics now." "How long were we asleep this time?" Kaney asked. 73 years, ma'am, 73 years. Added to all the other sleep cycles, that made it 307 years since the betrayal. Since the Coalition had left them here to die. "Why did we wake up?" she asked. "External contact, Admiral. Someone boarded the ship and accessed our computers. A salvage crew. They fled when we activated." Kaney stood slowly. Her body ached. She was old now, far older than any human should be. The cryosleep had kept her alive but not young. She walked to the main viewport and looked out at her fleet. Her ghost fleet. All those ships, all those people forgotten by the galaxy. They came back, she said quietly. Ma'am? Her officer asked. Caney turned to face her crew. In their eyes she saw the same thing she felt. Anger, pain, a burning need for justice that 300 years hadn't cooled. The salvagers, she explained. They're from the Coalition. The same coalition that abandoned us, that sabotaged our drives and left us to die in empty space. She paused. They forgot about us. They thought we were gone. She walked back to her command chair and sat down. But we're not gone. We survived. And now they've reminded us that they're still out there, living comfortable lives while we suffered in the dark. What are your orders, Admiral? Her operations officer asked. Sarah Caney looked at the stars beyond her viewport. Somewhere out there was Earth. Home. And somewhere out there were the aliens who had betrayed humanity. Wake everyone, she commanded. All crews, all ships. It's time to stop hiding in the dark. She smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It's time to go home. And it's time to collect what they owe us. Throughout the fleet, more ships came alive. Lights blazed in the darkness. Engines that hadn't fired in decades began to warm up. And thousands of humans, the forgotten ones, began to wake from their long sleep. The ghost fleet was returning, and it wanted revenge. Lieutenant James Kane walked through the narrow corridors of the carrier Indomitable, the only home he had ever known. He was 26 years old and had never set foot on a planet. He was born in space in this very ship, like his parents before him. The corridors were crowded now. Everyone was awake. After 300 years of rotating sleep schedules, the entire fleet was active at once. It felt strange. James passed dozens of people he had never seen before, people who had been asleep his entire life. Lieutenant Caney, report to Fighter Bay 3, his communicator buzzed. James changed direction and headed toward the fighter bay. He knew why they were calling him. The order had come from Admiral Caney herself, his great-great-grandmother, though he had never actually met her. She had been asleep during most of his life. The fighter bay was massive and filled with old fighter craft. James had trained in these fighters his whole life, running endless simulations, practicing maneuvers in the empty space around the fleet. Every child born on the fleet learned to fight. It was their purpose, their identity, Caney. Over here! Master Sergeant Okonkwo waved him over. James jogged to where the old Marine stood. Okonkwo was ancient, one of the original crew members from Earth. He was over 300 years old, kept alive by the cryo-sleep cycles. His dark skin was weathered, his eyes hard. James had trained under him since childhood. Sir, James saluted. Drop the formal stuff, kid, Okonkwo said. We're moving out soon. I wanted to talk to you before things get crazy. Moving out? Where? Okonkwo looked toward the stars beyond the bay's force field. Home. Earth. But first, we're going to visit some old friends who left us to die out here. James felt his stomach tighten. He had grown up on stories of the betrayal, how the coalition races had sabotaged the human fleet and abandoned them in dead space, how his ancestors had struggled to survive, turning warships into generation ships, rationing everything, watching friends and family die slowly. We're really doing this? James asked. We're really doing this, Okonkwo confirmed. The Admiral has made her decision. We're going back to Coalition space. We're going to remind them what they did. Across the ship in the main engineering section, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was working frantically. She was covered in grease, her black hair tied back, her hands moving quickly over the old machinery. Come on, you stubborn piece of junk, she muttered. Work with me here. Yuki was third generation like James. Her grandmother had been one of the original engineers who kept the fleet running when everything started breaking down. Yuki had learned everything from her, and she had learned from desperate necessity. The ships in the fleet weren't pretty anymore. They were covered in patches, held together with improvised parts, powered by systems that shouldn't work but did because Yuki and engineers like her refused to let them die. Dr. Tanaka, a voice called. She turned to see Admiral Caney walking toward her, accompanied by several officers. Yuki quickly wiped her hands and stood straight. She had never met the Admiral before. The old woman looked like death itself, thin and pale, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Admiral, Yuki said. I've read your file, Caney said. You've done remarkable work keeping this fleet operational. Your quantum slip drive design is particularly impressive. Thank you, ma'am. Though it's not really FTL. More like slow-motion dimensional phasing. We can move through space undetected, but it takes time. Time we have plenty of, Kaney said. Can you get the entire fleet operational? Combat ready? Yuki hesitated. Admiral, these ships are 300 years old. We've been cannibalizing parts, jury-rigging systems, keeping them alive with hope and spare parts. They'll fly and they'll fight, but they're not what they used to be. Kaney smiled slightly. Neither am I, neither are any of us. But we're still here and we're still dangerous. Make them work, Doctor. That's all I ask. Yes, ma'am, Yuki said. Later, Yuki found James in the mess hall. They had been friends since childhood, part of the same generation born in the void. Did you hear? James asked as she sat down. We're going back, I heard, Yuki said. I'm trying not to think about it too much. If I think about all the things that could go wrong with these ships during combat, I'll panic. Do you think we can win? James asked quietly. Yuki looked at her friend. Win? James, they have newer ships, better technology, more resources. On paper, we can't win, but we have something they don't. We have 300 years of anger. 300 years of survival against impossible odds. And we have nothing to lose. She paused. We were already dead. They killed us 300 years ago. We're just ghosts now, and ghosts don't lose. They haunt. In the medical bay, doctors were checking everyone who had just woken from cryosleep. The process was hard on the body, especially for the older crew members who had been through dozens of cycles. A young doctor, second generation, was checking the vitals of a sleeping Marine when the man's eyes suddenly opened. She jumped back in surprise. Easy, the Marine said. His voice was rough. How long? You've been asleep for 82 years, the doctor told him. We're waking everyone now. The Marine sat up slowly. He looked down at his hands. They were scarred and old. I was 23 when we got stranded, he said. How old am I now? Chronologically? 321. Biologically? Maybe 60, the Marine laughed bitterly. I should be dead. Hell, I was supposed to die in that last battle against the Devourers. Then I was supposed to die when they left us here. But I'm still here. He looked at the doctor. Why did they wake me? We're going back, she said simply. The Marine's expression changed. His eyes grew hard. Good. I have some people I want to talk to. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Old soldiers waking up, learning they were going home. Learning they were going to face the ones who betrayed them. Engineers working desperate miracles to make ancient ships battle-ready. Pilots training in simulators, preparing for fights they'd dreamed about for centuries. In the hydroponics bay, families harvested the last of the food crops. They would need all supplies for the journey. Children born in space asked their parents about Earth, a planet they had only seen in old videos. Admiral Kaney walked through her ship, seeing her people. Some were ancient like her, originals who had survived through countless sleep cycles. Others were young, born in the void, knowing only the inside of these ships. But all of them had one thing in common. They remembered. They remembered what was done to them. They remembered being abandoned. They remembered watching their children grow up never seeing a sun. They remembered rationing air and water and hope. And now, finally, they were going to make sure the ones who did this remembered too. Kaney returned to her bridge and sat in her command chair. Around her, the crew worked efficiently. These people were professionals trained by necessity, hardened by suffering. All ships report ready, Admiral, her operations officer announced. Fleet status? 42,000 vessels operational. Crews at full strength. Supplies sufficient for 18 months of operations. Weapon systems old but functional. Kaney nodded. Send the order. All ships prepare to move out. Set course for coalition space. Yes, ma'am. Admiral, one question. What's our first target? Sarah Kane looked at the star map. Out there, the coalition races lived comfortable lives. They had forgotten the humans they left to die. They had moved on. We're going to Talquan space, she said. They were the ones who proposed abandoning us. They're the ones who convinced the others. So they're the ones who get visited by ghosts first. She stood and addressed her bridge crew. We're going home, but we're taking the long way. And we're settling accounts along the way, for everyone who died here, for everyone who grew up in this darkness, for 300 years of suffering. Her crew nodded. They understood. The ghost fleet began to move, thousands of ships gliding silently through space, heading toward the coalition that thought it had killed them long ago. The Ghost Fleet moved through space like shadows. Dr. Tanaka's quantum slip drive worked exactly as she promised. The ships phased slightly out of normal space, making them nearly invisible to sensors. They were slow, but they were hidden. James Kane sat in his fighter cockpit running diagnostics for the 100th time. The fighter was old, its systems outdated by centuries. But it responded to his touch like a living thing. He had flown this exact fighter in simulations thousands of times. "Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader." He spoke into his comm. "Sound off," 11 voices responded. 12 fighters total in his squadron. Some pilots were veterans who had flown real combat missions 300 years ago. Others, like James, had never fought a real battle. They had only trained endlessly, waiting for a war that might never come. Now that war was here. "All pilots stay sharp," James said. "We're 3 days from Coalition space. When we get there, everything changes." The fleet had been traveling for 2 months. 2 months of slow, careful movement through the dark. Admiral Caney refused to rush. They had waited 300 years. They could wait a little longer. But then the distress signal came. "Admiral, we're picking up a transmission." The communications officer reported. "Human colony, New Providence. They're under attack." Everyone on the bridge stopped. "A human colony? Their people? Under attack. Put it on speakers," Caney ordered. The bridge filled with static and desperate voices. "This is New Providence to any coalition ships. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Request immediate assistance. We have civilians, families. Please, anyone, help us." The transmission repeated over and over. James listened from his fighter bay, his hands gripping the controls. "What are our orders?" someone asked Admiral Caney. Caney was silent for a long moment. "How far are they?" 6 hours at maximum speed, ma'am. But if we go to maximum speed, we'll show up on every sensor in this sector. Our stealth will be gone. And if we don't go?" Caney asked quietly. "If we stay hidden and let them die?" No one answered. They all knew what she was really asking. Were they willing to become like the Coalition? Were they willing to abandon people to save themselves? "All ships, maximum speed," Caney ordered. "Fighter wings, prepare to launch. We're going to help them." James felt his fighter bay depressurize as the launch sequence began. Around him, hundreds of other fighters were doing the same. His hands flew over the controls, his training taking over. "Blue Squadron, form up on me," he commanded. His fighter shot out of the bay into open space. What he saw made his breath catch. The Ghost Fleet, all 42,000 ships, were dropping out of quantum slip at once. They appeared like phantoms, their old hulls scarred and patched, but their weapons hot. Ahead, James could see New Providence. The colony was built on a small moon, domes covering the surface, and attacking it were 15 large warships. The Kresh Dominion, Admiral Caney had called them. A new empire expanding into human space. The Kresh ships were sleek and powerful, their weapons tearing apart the colony's minimal defenses. James watched a dome rupture, atmosphere venting into space. "All fighters, engage at will." Admiral Caney's voice came through. "Show them what happens when you attack humans." James dove toward the nearest Kresh ship. His fighter was old, but it was fast. The Kresh didn't see him coming until his weapons fire hit their shields. "Blue 2, Blue 3 on me," James called. "Attack pattern Delta." The 3 fighters swarmed the Kresh cruiser. Their weapons shouldn't have been able to hurt it. The Kresh shields were modern, powerful. But Dr. Tanaka had modified the weapons. She had spent 300 years learning to make old technology work in new ways. The Kresh shields flickered and failed. James's squadron poured fire into the cruiser's engines. The ship began to spin, damaged. All around New Providence, the battle raged. The Ghost Fleet's ships were slower and older, but they fought with a fury that shocked the Kresh. Human pilots flew attack patterns that no one had seen in centuries, tactics from old Earth wars, forgotten by everyone except the people who had nothing but time to study them. Master Sergeant Okonkwo led a boarding party onto a Kresh destroyer. His Marines crashed through the airlock, weapons firing. The Kresh soldiers inside fought back, but they had never faced humans like these. Humans who had survived 300 years of hardship. Humans who had grown up learning to fight because fighting was all they had. Okonkwo's team cleared the ship deck by deck. When they reached the command center, the Kresh captain stared at them in shock. "What are you?" the alien asked in broken human language. "We're the Forgotten," Okonkwo said, "and you just made a big mistake." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, all 15 Kresh ships were either destroyed or captured. The Ghost Fleet hadn't lost a single vessel, though many were damaged. James landed his fighter back on the Indomitable. His hands were shaking from adrenaline. He had done it. He had flown real combat, and he had survived. Admiral Caney contacted New Providence directly. The colony's governor appeared on screen, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. "We called for help, but the Coalition said they couldn't spare ships. They said we were too far from their core worlds. They were going to let us die." Caney's expression didn't change. "They're good at that, letting people die." "Who are you?" the governor asked. "Your ships are old, but you fight like demons. Are you from Earth?" "We're the Third Fleet," Caney said simply. "The fleet that was lost 300 years ago. The fleet the Coalition abandoned in dead space." The governor's eyes widened. "But that's impossible. Everyone said you were destroyed." "Everyone was wrong," Caney said. "We survived. And now we're going home. But first we have some business to settle with the Coalition." "What kind of business?" Caney smiled coldly. "The kind that involves reminding them what happens when you betray humanity." The governor was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We have information. Current star charts, political intelligence, Coalition fleet positions. We also have proof that the Coalition is negotiating with the Creche. They're planning to give up more human colonies to the Creche in exchange for peace." "Just like they gave us up," Caney said quietly. "Yes, but this time the colonies are inhabited. Millions of people." Caney looked at her crew. They were all watching her, waiting for her decision. They had saved New Providence, but that wasn't why they came. They came for revenge. "Send us everything you have," Caney said finally. "Charts, intelligence, all of it." "What will you do?" the governor asked. "We're going to stop them," Caney said. "We're going to make sure the Coalition never abandons another human again." After the transmission ended, Caney sat in her command chair. Around her, the bridge was busy with repairs and reorganization. "Admiral, we've uploaded all the data from New Providence," her operations officer reported. "It confirms our intelligence. The Coalition is planning to sacrifice 3 human colonies to the Creche next month." "Which colonies?" "New Shanghai, Freedom Station, and Terra Nova. Combined population of 4 million. Caney closed her eyes. 4 million people. 4 million humans that the Coalition was willing to trade away like they didn't matter. "Change of plans," she announced. "We're not going to Talquan Prime first. We're going to stop the Coalition from giving up those colonies." "Admiral, that wasn't the mission," someone objected. "We came for revenge. And we'll get it," Caney said. "But not at the cost of other humans. We're not like them. We don't abandon our people." She stood and looked at her crew. 300 years ago, they left us to die because they thought their lives were worth more than ours. They thought they could sacrifice us to save themselves. We're going to prove they were wrong. We're going to save those colonies. And then, when we're done, we're going to visit the Coalition and explain exactly what they did wrong. James listened to the announcement from his fighter bay. Around him, other pilots were talking quietly. "We came for revenge," one pilot said. "Now we're playing hero?" "Maybe that's better," another replied. "Maybe we show them we're better than they are." James thought about the people of New Providence, the families in those domes watching the battle, not knowing if they would live or die. He thought about what the Coalition had done, planning to sacrifice more colonies. "We're not playing hero," he said. "We're showing them what happens when you wake up ghosts. Ghosts don't just haunt the ones who wronged them. They protect the living from other monsters." The Ghost Fleet changed course. They were heading toward New Shanghai now, toward 4 million people who didn't know they had been marked for death by their own allies. Admiral Caney looked at the stars ahead. "We're coming," she whispered. "And this time no one gets left behind." Admiral Sarah Caney sat in the recording room alone. The lighting was adjusted carefully. Behind her, through the viewport, the Ghost Fleet was visible. Thousands of ships, their hulls bearing scars and names floating in formation. She had thought about what to say for 300 years. Now it was time. "Begin recording," she said, the camera activated. Caney stared directly into it. She looked old, ancient even. Her face was thin, her skin pale from centuries of recycled air and artificial light. Her uniform was the same one she had worn 300 years ago, patched and repaired countless times. She looked exactly like what she was, a ghost from another time. "My name is Admiral Sarah Caney of the Third Fleet, United Earth Space Navy," she began. Her voice was calm but hard as steel. 300 years ago, the Galactic Coalition sent us to fight the Devourers. We went willingly, We fought bravely. We helped you win that war, she paused. And then you left us to die. The Talquan sovereignty proposed it first. Humanity's third fleet was too expensive to maintain, they said. Too many resources needed to bring us home. So they sabotaged our FTL drives and stranded us in dead space. The Tazari Commonwealth agreed. The Vex hierarchy agreed. You all agreed. It was easier to sacrifice us than to save us. Caney leaned forward slightly. You told Earth we were lost in battle. You erected memorials. You called us heroes. And then you forgot about us. But we didn't die. We survived. We turned our warships into generation ships. We grew our own food. We recycled our own air. We watched our friends and family die slowly, knowing that help would never come, and we remembered everything you did to us. Behind her, the ghost fleet moved slightly, the ships catching the light. For 300 years, we survived in the dark. We had children. They had children, generation after generation born in the void, told stories about Earth and about the coalition that betrayed us. And now we're coming home. Caney's expression grew colder. We know what you're planning. We know you're negotiating with the Kresh Dominion. We know you're planning to give them New Shanghai, Freedom Station, and Terra Nova. 3 colonies, 4 million human lives. You're going to abandon them just like you abandoned us. But here's the difference. This time we're not dead. We're not gone. We're here, and we're not letting you do it again. She stood up, her full uniform visible now. On her chest were medals from another age, ribbons from battles the galaxy had forgotten. This message is going to every coalition world, every coalition leader, every coalition species. We are the third fleet, we are the forgotten, and we're done being forgotten. To Earth, we are still loyal to you even if your allies weren't. Stand aside. This isn't your fight. To the coalition, we're coming. Not for conquest, not for territory, for justice, for accountability, for every human you left to die in the dark. Caney placed her hand on the viewport behind her. This fleet carries the names of every person who died in the void. Every parent who watched their child grow up never seeing a son. Every soldier who waited 300 years for orders that never came. We carry their memory, and we're bringing it to you. You wanted us forgotten, but we remembered every single one. The recording ended. Caney sat back down, suddenly feeling every one of her 347 years. Send it, she ordered. Every coalition world. Every frequency. I want everyone to see it. The transmission went out simultaneously across coalition space. On Talquan Prime, the Sovereignty Council watched in stunned silence. On Tazari homeworld, government officials scrambled to verify if it was real. On Vex stations, analysts tried to understand how humans could have survived 300 years. But everywhere, the reaction was the same. Shock, then fear. On Earth, President Chen watched the transmission 3 times. Around him, his cabinet argued frantically. We need to support them, the defense minister said. They're our people. They're threatening the entire coalition, the foreign minister countered. If we side with them, we'll be isolated, cut off from trade, from protection. They already cut us off, another voice said. Earth is barely considered in coalition decisions anymore. They treat us like a backwater world because we're not powerful enough to matter. President Chen raised his hand for silence. What do we know about the Third Fleet? Everything Admiral Caney said is true, the defense minister reported. We have records. The Third Fleet was sent to fight the Devourers. They won the battle but never came home. The coalition told us they were destroyed. We built memorials, held ceremonies. We mourned them. But they weren't destroyed, Chen said quietly. They were abandoned. The coalition will demand we condemn the Third Fleet's actions, the foreign minister warned. And what would we condemn? Chen asked. That they survived? That they're coming home? That they're refusing to let the coalition sacrifice more humans? He shook his head. No, we're not condemning them. And we're not stopping them. On Talquan Prime, High Chancellor Velthar watched the human admiral's message for the 5th time. His skin was pale with fear. How many ships? He asked his military advisor. Preliminary scans show over 40,000 vessels. 40,000. That's impossible. The Third Fleet only had 50,000 ships when we left them. They couldn't have maintained that many for 300 years. Apparently they could, the advisor said quietly. And Chancellor, there's something else. Our salvage crew that reported finding the Ghost Fleet? Commander Velrix has testified that the humans he saw looked like they were ready to kill him. He said they had weapons, organization, purpose. This isn't a desperate refugee fleet. This is an army. Velthar stood and walked to the window overlooking his city. Talquan Prime was beautiful, prosperous. The sovereignty had thrived for 3 centuries. They had built wonders, advanced their technology, expanded their territory, and now ghosts from the past were coming to tear it all down. Mobilize the fleet, he ordered. All of it. Contact the Tazari and the Vex. We need a united response. And what about the human colonies? New Shanghai and the others? Velthar hesitated. Delay the negotiations with the Kresh. Tell them we need more time. They won't be happy. The Kresh are demanding territory now. The Kresh can wait, Velthar snapped. Right now we have a bigger problem. We have 300 years of revenge coming straight toward us. Throughout Coalition space, similar scenes played out. Fleets mobilized. Defense stations went on alert. Politicians argued about how to respond. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to fight. Many just wanted the Ghost Fleet to disappear back into the void. On the Ghost Fleet's flagship, Admiral Caney received reports of the Coalition's response. They're mobilizing everything they have, her intelligence officer reported. Every ship, every station, every defense platform. They're preparing for war. Good, Caney said. Let them prepare. Let them fear. They had 300 years of peace. We had 300 years of darkness. It's time they understood what that darkness felt like. James Kane sat in the pilot's mess hall with his squadron. They were watching the Coalition news broadcasts. Every channel was talking about the Ghost Fleet. Some called them heroes. Others called them terrorists. Most called them impossible. They don't know whether to fight us or surrender to us, one pilot laughed. They're scared, another said. You can see it in their faces. They thought we were dead and buried. Now we're a nightmare coming true. James was quieter. He thought about the colonies the Coalition was planning to abandon. New Shanghai. Freedom Station. Terra Nova. 4 million people who were about to become bargaining chips. We're saving them first, right? He asked. Before we go after the Coalition? That's the plan, his squadron mate confirmed. Admiral Caney wants to protect the colonies, then deal with the people who tried to sacrifice them. Do you think the Coalition will back down? Someone asked. No, James said. They can't. If they back down to us, they look weak to the Kresh. If they look weak to the Kresh will attack. They're trapped, so we fight them? James nodded slowly. We fight them, and we win, because we don't have any other choice. Dr. Tanaka was in engineering working on weapon systems. The Ghost Fleet's weapons were old, but she was making them deadly. She had spent her entire life learning to make broken things work. Now she was making them work for war. Doctor, we have a problem, one of her engineers said. The main cannon on the Indomitable is cracked. It might explode if we fire it. Tanaka looked at the diagnostic readout. The crack was deep, running through the entire barrel. A single shot might tear the cannon apart. Fix it, she said. We don't have replacement parts. That cannon design hasn't been manufactured in 200 years. Tanaka smiled. Then we make the parts. I've been making impossible things work my entire life. This is just one more. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Around her, hundreds of other engineers were doing the same thing. Making old ships ready for new battles. Making forgotten technology remember how to kill. The Ghost Fleet continued toward the Coalition's territory. Behind them was 300 years of darkness. Ahead was revenge, justice, and 4 million people who needed saving. Admiral Caney stood on her bridge and watched the stars. They wanted us forgotten, she said quietly. Now they'll never forget us again. The Ghost Fleet arrived at Talquan Prime exactly 3 weeks after sending their message. They dropped out of quantum slip on the edge of the system, 42,000 ships appearing like phantoms from the dark. Admiral Caney stood on her bridge, looking at the enemy fleet waiting for them. The Coalition had assembled everything they had. 5,000 modern warships, including vessels from the Talquan Sovereignty, the Tazari Commonwealth, and the Vex Hierarchy. Their ships were sleek and new, bristling with advanced weapons. They outnumber us in firepower, her tactical officer reported. Their shields are stronger, their weapons have longer range, their ships are faster. But they have one disadvantage, Caney said quietly. They think they can lose and go home. We know we were already dead 300 years ago. We have nothing to lose. She opened a channel to the Coalition fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Kane. I'm giving you one chance. Stand aside. Let us pass. We're going to New Shanghai to protect the colony you were planning to sacrifice. The Coalition commander appeared on screen. He was Talquan, his blue skin marked with rank insignations. Admiral Caney, I am Fleet Commander Torvan. I cannot let you pass. Your fleet is a threat to the stability of this region. We're a threat to your comfortable lives, Caney shot back. You left us to die. Now you're planning to do the same thing to millions of others. We're stopping you. If you proceed, we will open fire. Caney smiled coldly. Then open fire? But remember, Commander, you're fighting ghosts, and ghosts don't die easily. The transmission ended. Caney turned to her crew. All ships battle formation. Fighter wings launch. Marines prepare for boarding actions. Today we remind them what happens when you betray humanity. James Kane sat in his fighter, his hands steady on the controls. Around him, thousands of other fighters launched from their carriers. The fighter bay depressurized and he shot into space. Blue Squadron, form up, he commanded. His squadron mates fell into position around him. They had practiced this maneuver 10,000 times. Now it was real. The Coalition fleet opened fire first. Beams of energy lanced across space, hitting the Ghost fleet's shields. Several human ships took damage immediately, but the Ghost fleet didn't slow down. They charged forward, closing the distance. They're trying to get into close range, the Coalition commander realized. Don't let them close. Maintain distance. But the Ghost fleet was faster than expected. Dr. Tanaka's modifications had improved their engines. The ancient human ships accelerated hard, eating up the distance between the fleets. James dove his fighter toward a Coalition cruiser. His targeting computer locked on, he fired. The old weapons, modified by Tanaka's genius, punched through the modern shields. The cruiser's hull ruptured. Their shields, someone shouted on the Coalition channel. Our shields aren't stopping their weapons. The Coalition had spent 300 years improving their technology. But they had forgotten the old human weapons, forgotten how they worked. Dr. Tanaka hadn't forgotten. She had spent her entire life studying them. And she had found their weaknesses. The battle descended into chaos. The Ghost fleet fought like demons, using tactics from ancient Earth wars. They used ramming maneuvers, something no modern fleet would consider. They used boarding actions, cutting through hulls and fighting deck by deck. They used their fighters in swarm attacks, overwhelming the Coalition's targeting systems. Master Sergeant Okonkwo led his Marines onto a Talquan battleship. His team cut through the airlock with ancient cutting torches, salvaged and repaired countless times. They poured into the ship, weapons firing. The Talquan crew fought back, but they weren't prepared for humans like these. Okonkwo's Marines had trained for 300 years. They had grown up learning combat because survival meant being ready to fight. Okonkwo reached the battleship's bridge. The Talquan captain stood there, his weapon drawn. "Surrender," Okonkwo said. "Never," the captain replied. "You're terrorists." "No," Okonkwo said quietly. "We're the people you left to die." "There's a difference." He moved forward. The Talquan captain fired, but Okonkwo was faster. 300 years of waiting had made him very, very good at this. The captain fell. Okonkwo accessed the ship's communication system. "This ship is now under human control," he announced. "All Talquan crew surrender or die. Choose quickly." Throughout the battle, similar scenes played out. The Ghost fleet was taking heavy damage. Ships were destroyed, fighters were shot down, people were dying. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. This was what they had waited 300 years for. On the Indomitable's bridge, alarms were blaring. "Forward shields at 10%, the tactical officer shouted. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualties mounting. Keep firing," Caney ordered. Her ship shook from another impact. "Target their command ship. If we take out their commander, the rest will fall apart." Dr. Tanaka was in engineering, working frantically to keep systems running. A console exploded next to her and she was thrown against the wall. She got up, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and went back to work. "We're losing power to the main weapons," someone shouted. "Reroute from life support," Tanaka ordered. "But that will kill the air recycling." "We'll be dead anyway if we don't fight back," Tanaka said. "Do it." The weapons came back online. The Indomitable's main cannon fired, the repaired weapon holding together just barely. The shot hit the Coalition command ship shields, overwhelming them. The second shot hit the hull. Commander Torvan felt his ship shudder. Alerts filled his screens. The humans were targeting his command vessel specifically. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships fall back." "Sir, if we retreat, we lose Talquan Prime." Torvan looked at the battle display. The Ghost fleet had lost thousands of ships, but they were still coming. Still fighting, they fought like they had nothing to lose because they didn't. If we stay, we lose everything, he said. Retreat now. The coalition fleet began to pull back. The Ghost fleet pursued, pressing their advantage. James led his squadron in a final attack run, destroying a retreating destroyer's engines. Then something changed. New contacts appeared on the sensors. Lots of them. Admiral, we have incoming ships, the sensor officer reported. Unknown configuration. Kresh Dominion signatures. Caney felt her blood run cold. The Kresh. They had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the coalition fleet to be weakened. 30 Kresh warships dropped out of FTL. They were massive dreadnoughts and battle carriers, far larger than anything the coalition or the Ghost fleet had. This is Kresh war leader Thruk. A harsh voice came over all channels. The coalition is weak. Talquan Prime is ours now. All other species will leave or be destroyed. The coalition fleet stopped retreating. The Ghost fleet stopped pursuing. Everyone stared at the Kresh armada. The Kresh opened fire on everyone. Their weapons tore through coalition ships. They launched fighters toward the Ghost fleet. They began orbital bombardment of Talquan Prime itself. Caney watched as Kresh missiles streaked toward the planet below. Toward cities full of billions of Talquan civilians, the same Talquan who had betrayed humanity 300 years ago. Admiral, what are your orders? Her tactical officer asked. Caney was silent. This was the moment. She could watch the Talquan die. She could let the Kresh destroy them. It would be revenge, perfect revenge. She looked at her crew. At the young people born in the void. At the old soldiers who had waited 300 years. At the names painted on her ship's hull. Names of people who had died in the darkness. We didn't survive 300 years to become like them, she said finally. All ships, new target. The Kresh, protect Talquan Prime. Admiral? Someone questioned. We're not them, Caney said firmly. We don't abandon people to die, even if they abandoned us. She opened a channel to the coalition fleet. Commander Torvon, this is Admiral Caney. I suggest we continue our disagreement later. Right now we have a common enemy. Torvon appeared on screen. He looked shocked. You would help us? After everything? I'm not helping you, Caney said. I'm protecting the innocent people on that planet who had nothing to do with your leader's decisions. There's a difference. She cut the transmission and addressed her fleet. All ships engage the Kresh. Show them what happens when they attack humans and their allies. The Ghost fleet turned as one and charged toward the Kresh armada. Behind them, hesitantly, the coalition fleet followed. James redirected his fighter toward the nearest Kresh dreadnought. Blue Squadron, with me. Let's teach these bastards a lesson. The Kresh were powerful. Their ships were massive and heavily armed. But they had made one mistake. They thought the humans and the coalition were beaten, weakened, easy prey. They were wrong. The combined human and coalition fleet hit the Kresh like a hammer. The Ghost fleet, already damaged and bleeding, threw everything they had at the Kresh. Ancient human ships, held together with determination and desperation, rammed into Kresh dreadnoughts. The Indomitable took a direct hit from a Kresh plasma cannon. The entire ship shook. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks. The main reactor went critical. Evacuate the ship, someone shouted. No, Admiral Caney said calmly. Take us in. Full speed. Target that Kresh command ship. Admiral, if we get that close, we'll never pull away. Caney smiled. I know. She opened a fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Sarah Kane. It has been an honor to serve with you all. For 300 years, we survived together. We suffered together. We remembered together. Now we finish. The James Kane watched the explosion from his fighter. The fireball expanded, consuming both the Indomitable and the Kresh command ship. He felt tears on his face. Admiral Caney was gone. His great-great-grandmother, the woman who had kept them alive for 300 years, was gone. Blue Leader, this is command. A voice came through his comm. It was shaking. Admiral Caney is, we've lost the Indomitable. You need to return to the fleet, but James couldn't move. He just stared at where the Indomitable had been. Then something happened. The other Kresh ships began to fall back. The destruction of their command ship had broken their formation. The Ghost fleet and the coalition fleet pressed their advantage, driving the Kresh away from Talquan Prime. They're retreating, someone shouted over the fleet channel. The Kresh are retreating, the battle was over. The Kresh fled into FTL, leaving behind their damaged ships. The Ghost fleet and coalition fleet hung in space, battered and exhausted. James finally flew back to his carrier. But it wasn't the Indomitable anymore. That ship was gone. He landed on the Defiant, another carrier. When he climbed out of his fighter, his legs almost gave out. Master Sergeant Okonkwo was there, his armor scorched and damaged. "You did good, kid," the old Marine said. "The Admiral," James said. "She's gone." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "She went out like a warrior, like a hero. She saved billions of people today. Talquan, human, everyone on that planet. But she's gone." "Yeah," Okonkwo said quietly. "But what she did, what we all did today, that's not gone. That will never be gone." On Talquan Prime, the population had watched the battle from below. They had seen their own fleet retreating. They had seen the crash preparing to destroy their cities. And they had seen the ancient human fleet, the fleet they had betrayed 300 years ago, turn and defend them. High Chancellor Velthar stood in his office, watching rescue ships moving through the debris field. Coalition ships and Ghost Fleet ships working together to save survivors. "How many did we lose?" he asked quietly. 1,700 coalition ships destroyed, his advisor reported. The humans lost over 30,000 ships, including their flagship. 30,000 ships. 3/4 of their fleet. They had sacrificed almost everything to protect a world that had once betrayed them. "Get me a channel to the human fleet," Velthar said. "I need to speak to whoever is in command now." Dr. Yuki Tanaka found herself in command of the Ghost Fleet, simply because she was the highest-ranking officer still alive. She stood in the makeshift command center on the Defiant, still covered in grease and blood from the battle. "We have an incoming transmission from Talquan Prime," the communications officer said. "It's the High Chancellor." Tanaka didn't want to talk to him. She wanted to mourn. She wanted to scream. She wanted to break something. But she was in command now. She had responsibilities. "Put him on," she said. Velthar appeared on screen. He looked old and tired. "Dr. Tanaka, I understand you are now in command of the human fleet." "What's left of it?" Tanaka said coldly. Velthar was silent for a moment. "What you did today, protecting our world after what we did to you, I cannot explain it. I cannot understand it." "That's because you would never do the same thing," Tanaka said. "You proved that 300 years ago when you left us to die." "Yes," Velthar said quietly. "We did, and we were wrong. Horribly, unforgivably wrong. Is that an apology?" "No, an apology would be insulting. There are no words that can apologize for what was done to you. But I want you to know that what happened today will not be forgotten. The Coalition, especially the Talquan, owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Tanaka wanted to yell at him, to tell him that his debt meant nothing, that 30,000 ships and millions of lives could never be repaid. But she was too tired. "We're going to search for survivors," she said. "Then we're going home. To Earth, that's all we want, to go home. The Coalition will provide any assistance you need," Velthar said. "Ships, supplies, medical aid, anything. We don't want your charity." "It's not charity. It's the least we can do. And Dr. Tanaka, there's something else. The Coalition leadership is being called to answer for what happened 300 years ago. There will be trials, justice." Tanaka shook her head. "Justice? You can't give us justice. Justice would be giving us back the 300 years we lost. Justice would be bringing back everyone who died in the void." "You can't do that, no," Velthar agreed. "We can't. But we can make sure it never happens again. We can make sure the Coalition never abandons anyone again. We can honor what you did today by being better." The transmission ended. Tanaka sat down heavily. Around her, the surviving crew of the Ghost Fleet was working to coordinate rescue operations. James found Okonkwo in the Marine barracks. The old sergeant was sitting alone, staring at a data pad. On it were names. "Thousands and thousands of names. What is that?" James asked. "The casualty list from today," Okonkwo said. 30,000 ships. Over 600,000 people. All dead. James sat down next to him. "We saved billions, I know. Admiral Caney made the right choice. But that doesn't make it hurt less." Okonkwo looked at James. "I'm over 300 years old. I've outlived everyone I knew on Earth. I've watched friends die in the void. I've waited my entire life for this day, and now it's over. What do we do now?" James asked. "We go home," Okonkwo said simply. "We take what's left of this fleet and we go home to Earth. We tell them what happened. We honor the ones who didn't make it. And we try to live normal lives, and can we? After everything?" Okonkwo smiled sadly. "Probably not. But we can try." 3 weeks later, the Ghost Fleet arrived at Earth. What remained of the fleet, barely 12,000 ships, dropped out of FTL on the edge of the solar system. Earth had been preparing for their arrival. President Chen had mobilized every resource: medical ships, supply vessels, and most importantly, a massive crowd gathered at the orbital docks. Dr. Tanaka guided the fleet slowly toward Earth. Through the viewport, she could see the blue planet, the world none of them had ever seen except in pictures. Home. "Doctor, we're being hailed by Earth," the communications officer said. "It's the president." President Chen appeared on screen. Behind him, Tanaka could see crowds of people all watching. "Dr. Tanaka, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, welcome home," Chen said. His voice was thick with emotion. "You have been gone for 300 years, but you were never forgotten. Every year we honored the Third Fleet. Every year we mourned your loss. And now you've come home, not just as survivors, but as heroes." Tanaka felt tears running down her face. "We're not heroes, Mr. President. We just did what we had to do." "You saved billions of lives," Chen said. "You proved that humanity doesn't abandon its people. You showed the entire galaxy what we stand for. You are heroes whether you believe it or not." The Ghost Fleet docked at Earth's orbital stations. For the first time in 300 years, the survivors stepped off their ships onto territory that wasn't ancient and recycled. They saw people who weren't the same few faces they had known their entire lives. They saw a world that was alive and thriving. James walked through the docking port in a daze. People were everywhere, cheering, crying, reaching out to touch the returning fleet members. An elderly woman grabbed his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "My grandfather was on the Third Fleet. He died in the void. But you came home. You came home for him." James didn't know what to say. He just nodded. Master Sergeant Okonkwo stood at the viewport looking down at Earth. A young reporter approached him. "Sergeant Okonkwo, you're one of the original crew members. What does it feel like to finally see Earth again?" Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. "Strange," he finally said. "I left this planet as a young man, 23 years old. Now I'm over 300. Everyone I knew is long dead. This world is different from the one I left, but it's still home. What will you do now?" "Rest," Okonkwo said. "For the first time in 300 years, I'm going to rest." The coalition kept its promises. Trials were held. The leaders who had orchestrated the abandonment of the Third Fleet were prosecuted. The Talquan, Tazari, and Vex governments all issued formal apologies and paid massive reparations. Human space expanded dramatically. The coalition ceded territory, provided ships and resources, and most importantly, gave humanity a permanent seat on the Coalition Council with veto power. Never again would human lives be treated as expendable. The surviving ships of the Ghost Fleet were offered a choice. They could be scrapped, their crews given new modern vessels, or they could be preserved as memorials. Every single crew voted to preserve their ships. The battered, scarred vessels were placed in orbit around Earth, a permanent reminder of what humanity had endured and survived. 6 months after returning home, Yuki Tanaka stood before the memorial of the lost fleet on Earth. The memorial had been updated. It now included the names of everyone who had died in the 300 years of exile, and everyone who had died in the final battle. At the base of the memorial, someone had placed Admiral Kaney's admiral insignia, recovered from the wreckage of the Indomitable. Tanaka placed her hand on the cold stone.